She was only 3 years old. But she heard the one thing a billionaire worth $3 billion had spent years trying to hide. In 5 years of working inside this mansion, Elena Vasquez had cleaned every room, polished every surface, and learned every rule. And the most important rule, the one her employer had stated only once but never needed to repeat, was that the door at the end of the third-floor hallway was never to be touched. Not for any reason. Not ever. She had always respected that. Until the Tuesday morning her 3-year-old daughter walked straight up to that door, raised her tiny fist, and knocked. And from the other side of the door, something knocked back. What Elena discovered in the next 60 seconds would make international headlines and bring one of America's most powerful men to his knees. Before we begin the story, if you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comment where you are watching from, because I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Nobody told Sophia to be quiet that morning. She already was. She had been sitting on her little blanket in the middle of that long marble hallway for almost 40 minutes, stacking her wooden blocks the way 3-year-olds do, with total concentration, like it was the most important work in the world. Her small hands moved carefully. Her eyes were focused. Around her, the mansion breathed its usual silence, the kind of silence that doesn't happen by accident, the kind that gets designed, maintained, and paid for. This was not a house that made noise. 47 rooms spread across 4 floors of a Connecticut estate, and on most mornings the only sounds Elena Vasquez could identify were her own footsteps on the marble and the distant hum of the climate control system, keeping the air at a temperature its owner would never be home long enough to appreciate. 5 years she had worked here. 5 years of arriving at 6 in the morning, moving through the rooms like a ghost, and leaving before the world outside woke up. She knew this house the way you come to know any place you give your best hours to. Its moods, its cold spots, its particular kind of loneliness. She knew, for instance, exactly which room she was permitted to enter, and she knew exactly which one she was not. The door at the far end of the third-floor hallway had been pointed out to her on her very first day, not with anger, not with drama, just a single quiet statement from the property manager who had onboarded her. That door stays closed. Elena had nodded. She had never touched it. Not once in 5 years had she even rested her eyes on it for longer than a passing second. The way you learn not to stare at something you understand is not yours to look at. She was on the second floor that Tuesday morning when she realized Sophia had gone quiet, not the focused quiet of a child playing. The other kind. The still kind, the kind that makes a mother's chest tighten before her brain has even processed why. Elena stepped into the hallway. Sophia was standing up, her blocks abandoned behind her on the blanket, her small body completely motionless at the far end of the corridor, facing the one door in the house that was never, under any circumstances, supposed to be opened. Her head was tilted slightly to the side, that particular angle children have when they're listening to something with their whole being. Elena took one step toward her, and then Sophia turned around, found her mother's eyes across the length of that marble hallway, and said it, quietly, certainly, the way children say things they have no reason to doubt. Mama, crying. Elena froze. In 5 years, she had never heard a single sound come from behind that door. Not a voice. Not a footstep, not even the particular silence of a room being occupied. Mr. Hale had not been seen at the property in over 3 weeks. She had been told he was abroad on business. The house had felt emptier than usual, which she had not thought possible. She stood there for a moment that felt much longer than it was. And then Sophia turned back toward the door, raised her tiny fist, and knocked 3 times. The sound of her knuckles on the wood was impossibly loud in that silence. Elena's breath stopped, and from the other side of the door, something knocked back. What Elena discovered in the next 60 seconds would not stay inside that mansion. It would move through 3 countries, appear on the front pages of newspapers that normally concern themselves only with markets and mergers, and permanently alter the lives of everyone standing in that hallway. including the one person none of them had yet seen. But first, she had to open the door. Marcus Hale did not look like a man who had grown up with nothing, but he had. Born in a two-room house in rural Mississippi to a mother who cleaned other people's homes, and a father who left before Marcus was old enough to remember his face. He had built $3 billion from that beginning. Not through inheritance, not through luck, but through the kind of relentless, joyless discipline that leaves a man wealthy beyond imagination and almost completely alone. 3 failed marriages, 2 estranged sons, 47 rooms, and every weekday morning at 6, Elena Vasquez, who also knew what it meant to build something from nothing, who also knew what it cost, arrived, put on her uniform, and got to work. Same house, different worlds entirely. Neither of them knew that was about to change. Elena told herself it was nothing. Children hear things, imagine things. That is what they do. She crossed the hallway, took Sophia's small hand firmly in hers, and turned them both around. They were going back downstairs. They were going to finish the work, collect their things, and leave exactly the way they came, quietly, carefully, without disturbing a single thing that did not belong to them. Sophia stopped walking. She looked up at her mother with the particular expression 3-year-olds reserve for moments when they know, with absolute certainty, that the adult is wrong. Then she turned back toward the door, walked up to Alone, and knocked 3 times with her tiny fist. The silence that followed lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then 3 knocks came back. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. Her heart was hammering. 5 years of careful, grateful, disciplined employment stood on one side of that moment. And on the other side, something behind a door that was never supposed to make a sound. Her hand reached for the handle. It was not darkness. It was not danger. It was a little boy, no older than Sophia, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the most expensive bedroom Elena had ever seen, surrounded by toys she had never once noticed during 5 years of cleaning this house. He was eating dry crackers from a box, methodically, the way hungry children eat when they have learned not to expect anything better. He looked up at her with calm, enormous eyes, and said one word, "Hungry." Elena's legs nearly gave way beneath her, not from fear, from recognition. She had seen those eyes every single working day for 5 years. They hung above the fireplace in the study, in a family portrait she had dusted so many times she could have drawn it from memory. Those were Marcus Hale's eyes. Exactly. Sophia walked past her mother without hesitation, sat down beside the boy, and offered him half of her sandwich. No history, no calculation, just a child recognizing another child who needed something she had. Elena's hands were shaking as she searched the room. On the bedside table, a sealed envelope, no name on the outside. Inside, 2 pages of handwriting in a woman's careful script that explained everything and somehow made everything worse. A name, a connection to Marcus Hale's youngest son, the one who had died in a car accident 8 months ago. A child nobody in the public knew existed, left at the only address his mother could find, with a note that said simply, "He deserves more than I can give him." Elena sat down on the floor of a billionaire's bedroom, a stranger's letter in her hands, while her daughter patted the boy's back and told him softly that crying was okay. She had no idea what to do next. She heard it before she understood what it was. A door, heavy, deliberate, the particular sound of the front entrance of a 47-room mansion swinging open on its hinges, a sound Elena had heard 500 times before and never once feared. She feared it now. Footsteps on marble, slow, measured, familiar, the walk of a man who owned every surface his shoes touched, moving toward the staircase. Coming up, Elena looked at the 2 children on the floor. She looked at the letter still open in her hands. She looked at the door she was never supposed to have opened, standing wide behind her. 5 years of employment, a daughter to feed, a rent payment due in 11 days, and a secret so large it had been hidden in plain sight inside a 47-room mansion for 6 weeks without a single person knowing. The footsteps reached the top of the staircase. Now, Here's what you don't yet know. What Marcus Hale was carrying when he walked through that front door was not anger. It was not suspicion. It was something far heavier than either of those things. And what happened when he stepped into that bedroom and saw Elena standing there? That is the part nobody predicted. Not even Elena. Marcus Hale pushed the door open. He saw Elena first. Standing in the center of the room, she had never been permitted to enter, a letter in her hands, her face stripped of every carefully maintained expression of professional neutrality she had worn for 5 years. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then he looked past her and saw the boy. Something happened to Marcus Hale's face in that moment that Elena had never seen happen to it before. 5 years of watching a man conduct himself with absolute, impenetrable control, and in the space of 1 second, all of it left him completely. He walked past Elena without a word. He lowered himself to the floor beside the child, and he did not get back up for a very long time. He had known about the boy for 6 weeks. His son's partner had arrived at the mansion in the middle of the night. Sick, exhausted, certain she could not do what needed to be done alone. She had left the child and the letter and driven away before morning. Marcus had taken the boy in and told absolutely nobody, not his lawyers, not his assistant, not the 2 estranged sons who had long since stopped returning his calls. He was not hiding the child from the world. He was hiding himself from the possibility of failing another person he loved. Elena put the letter down. She looked at this man. $3 billion, 47 rooms, and a grief so private he had carried it entirely alone, sitting on the floor beside a little boy who shared his eyes. She did not calculate what the information was worth. She did not reach for her phone. She asked one question. Has he eaten a proper meal today? Marcus looked up at her. Something moved across his face that had not been there in a very long time. He shook his head. Elena went downstairs and made the child a meal. And in doing so, without fully understanding it yet, she made a decision that would quietly rebuild the life of every person inside that mansion. 2 years later, a large kitchen in a Connecticut mansion. Sophia and James, because that was a boy's name, and you have earned the right to know it now, sitting side by side at the same kitchen table, doing homework together, their heads bent close, their pencils moving, occasionally one of them leaning over to look at what the other had written, the way children do when they have decided, without any formal agreement, that they belong to each other. Elena stood at the counter. Marcus Hale sat across from the children with his reading glasses on and a folder of papers in front of him that he had not looked at in 20 minutes. Nobody spoke. Nothing needed to be said. This is what $3 billion cannot build. This is what no boardroom negotiation, no acquisition, no carefully worded contract has ever once produced. 2 children doing homework, a woman who chose decency over security, and a man who had spent 40 years constructing walls, finally sitting quietly inside a room he had not built alone. So here's the question I want to leave with you today. If you were Elena, standing outside that forbidden door, 5 years of employment behind you, a daughter depending on you, everything to lose, would you have turned the handle? Leave your answer in the comments. There is no wrong response. That is exactly why I am asking.